Hi, everyone. In this session, we're going to look at how global, authentic content, real stories and information presented through text, photography, and video can help English language learners maximize their language development in all four skills: reading, writing, listening, and speaking. My name is Anders Bylund, and this is Dave Spain.
Hello.
We are members of the Global Product Marketing Team at National Geographic Learning, focusing on English programs for young learners and teenagers across the globe. Our goal today is to answer a simple question: why? Why use authentic global content as the foundation for our English language curriculum? How does working with this type of input help the classroom and help the English language learner? We're going to start our conversation today with a video featuring a National Geographic explorer named Andres Russo. Some of you may already be familiar with his work. In this video, he's going to explain a little bit about what he does and why he feels that learning English is important. He's also going to help us start to uncover some answers to this question: why use global content? So let's hear what he has to say.
My name is Andres Russo, and I'm a geothermal scientist and a National Geographic explorer. The project that I've really dedicated most of my life to is called the Boiling River Project. Long story short, in 2011, I became the first geoscientist granted the shamanic blessing to study this amazing sacred site. It's the largest documented thermal river in the world. It can be up to 100 feet wide at its widest point, up to 15 feet deep at its deepest point, and it flows hot for just under 4 miles, and it's not associated with any active volcanoes. Science, in my opinion, has a moral responsibility. We are the eyes of humanity. We help people understand what is truth. That truth is the basis of how we live our lives. In this case, we're working together with our shamans and our local collaborators, the Amazonians, to help them tell their stories while they help us tell our story. Not knowing how to speak English is a handicap in getting your message out to a global audience. Even now, I'm working with a brilliant shamaness. She's Shipibo. She speaks Shipibo, she speaks Spanish, but right now we're trying to get her to learn English so that she can tell her story herself. English opens a whole new world of opportunities. It's amazing. It is the language of our planet. We need to include all of the perspectives we can. A local perspective, a foreign perspective, coming together to give something great. I think if students, if teachers could understand, could take a step back from this themselves and say, what is my local perspective? What is my foreign perspective? Anywhere you are in the world, you will find something amazing, because that's how incredible this planet is.
Okay, so Andres touches on a lot of really interesting ideas in this short video clip, but this is the section of the video that really jumps out at me. First, this idea that everyone in the world has a local and a foreign perspective is an interesting one. It respects the fact that students and teachers in the classroom have their own pool of experiences that they're pulling from. Maybe it's a cultural experience in the sense that maybe they've come from another part of the world and they have their own traditions and customs, or maybe it's just as simple as a personal experience of, family traditions that they do around the dinner table. Working with real-world information provides a hook for all learners, something that students can relate to and recognize as meaningful and relevant, something that will motivate them to want to share and discuss and communicate in English. It also points to the fact that curiosity is an incredibly powerful motivator in the classroom. If you can show students something they've never seen before and present it in a really interesting way, you'll see your classroom come to life in really engaging ways that maybe you couldn't anticipate before.
So what Anders is articulating and what he's pointing out from Andres Russo's video is exactly what we believe at National Geographic Learning. Our mission is to bring the world to the classroom and the classroom to life. Of course, one of our primary focuses is to support language learning goals and outcomes in the classroom. But we also want to ensure that through the material we provide, that students are able to experience the world outside their classroom walls as well. The real world content that we include in our materials, combined with comprehensive language curricula and age appropriate activities, leads to successful and memorable classroom experiences. Today, what we'd love to do is show you some examples of how the different materials that we develop and provide for elementary and teen learners helps bring the classroom to life and the world to those classrooms and gives ELLs of all ages the support they need to succeed.
So when our editorial teams, authors, and pedagogical specialists are looking at content to include in our programs, they generally ask three questions. They look at three pieces of criteria. First, they ask, is this content purposeful? Does it connect to the goals of the learner, curriculum, classroom? Is it meaningful to learners? Can they understand and practice language, how it's really going to be used outside of the classroom? And is it relevant to learners? Does it have that hook? Does the content respect students' experiences and connect with their lives? And we're going to give you some examples of these areas today from some of our different materials for young learners and teens, anywhere from ages 3 to 18, more or less. And let's start with exploring the idea of purposeful. Really, our goal at National Geographic Learning is to help develop confident users of English, students who can communicate in a variety of social and academic settings. ELLs need explicit language instruction in all 4 domains: reading, writing, listening, speaking, plus vocabulary and grammar in order to do this. Our programs work in a variety of classroom contexts in as little as 2 or 3 hours per week in some cases, with very focused language instruction that is designed to promote fluency, designed to promote fluent users of English who are able to communicate their own thoughts and ideas confidently wherever they might be, in the classroom or outside of the classroom. Let me give you an example of what I mean by a focused language lesson that can be achieved in shorter bursts with clear language and content objectives. This is a unit from one of our programs called Impact. This is level 2 of the program, and Impact is designed for middle school age learners. Units are organized thematically, and each unit has clear language and content objectives. So in this unit, students will learn how to talk about colors, how to correct misinformation, use comparatives and superlatives, use the to identify general and specific things, and write a paragraph with a topic sentence. Throughout the unit, they'll be exposed to a variety of both written and spoken English, and will build target and academic vocabulary regularly throughout the unit as they go. In addition to these language objectives, there are also content objectives. So within this unit about color, students will be exposed to lessons about history, the history of the color purple, and a science lesson in the form of a video about the color spectrum and the range of visible light. Let me show you how this looks. I'm actually going to open the classroom presentation tool. All of our programs at National Geographic Learning come with a full suite of digital resources, and especially now, something like the classroom presentation tool, which allows us to work with the student book content digitally, is just hugely important. So this is the unit that we were just looking at in the presentation, and I'll start with the unit opener. So here we are introducing the unit, we are maybe activating some prior knowledge, getting students asking questions about the topic. And then as students move through this unit, they'll be exposed to vocabulary presented in context. They'll have very controlled practice building to more open-ended opportunities for production and communication. They'll get explicit grammar lessons. This is the reading. Note how visually impactful this is. So that students will be exposed to language presented in traditional texts, but also in a variety of different ways, similar to what they'll encounter, when they go online. There'll be video lessons, and we'll look at one of these in a moment. There'll be grammar that's tied specifically to writing. So there's different grammatical points for spoken English and for written English. And they'll be exposed to a variety of shared values of global citizenship and opportunities to show and demonstrate what they've learned through open-ended projects. Now, we don't have time, unfortunately, to go through everything here, but I do want to give you a couple of really specific examples. So here we have a speaking strategy. And first, students are introduced to the strategy that they're going to be learning about. This lesson is about politely correcting information. This is a really good example of a lesson that's designed to promote fluency and help learners navigate, some of the challenges that come up in real life situations, right? So other examples of a speaking strategy might be extending conversations, asking for help, expressing opinions, offering advice or declining advice from somebody else. So we really want to keep the strategies that we're focused on here, applicable to real world situations. So, is correcting information or politely correcting information important? And, typically I would ask all of you in the audience to give me some situations where being able to politely correct information would be really important. Dangerous situations or emergencies, telling a friend you're going to miss a movie or miss a bus, something where time is really important, or even just a social situation where maybe somebody's calling you by the wrong name and you want to politely correct them. One of the nice things about the classroom presentation tool is that all of the multimedia that comes with the program is right here at point of use. So I can actually just go ahead, skip to the middle.
Actually, it isn't blue. As a matter of fact, the light from the sun is lots of colors.
We won't listen to the whole audio track, but you can see here we're introducing the speaking strategy. We're providing models for politely correcting information. And then we're going to give students an opportunity to practice this in a really controlled way. So here's a basic task where two individuals are having a conversation, right? It's a traditional dialogue. But note as you're reading through this, that even here in this controlled practice, we're able to keep the focus on real world information. So here, people are discussing the differences in the design of wedding dresses in different parts of the world. So even though this is a really controlled activity, we're still able to weave in some of those kind of intercultural touch points and keep the lesson grounded in something meaningful and real. And then at the end of this lesson, we have some open-ended opportunities to practice through some games and different kind of fun and interesting activities for students. But make note of the question 10 at the bottom there. I think this is really interesting because we're not only teaching kind of the nuts and bolts of language, we also want to make sure students are understanding why this is important and where they would use this outside of the classroom. I'm going to show you one more lesson very quickly to demonstrate the science piece that I mentioned earlier. So I'm going to go to the video. Here I have all of the different content on the page, but we're going to dive right into the video. I'm actually going to turn this down for just a moment. And I really think this is a good example of weaving in some cross-curricular information into a language program. Half of the videos in Impact are what we call infographic videos. So this is not real world footage. This is a scripted narration of some information about the spectrum of visible light. So I could turn on the script here and you'd see we have that added level of support. And the narrator's talking about how different animals are able to see different things, right? just the way that they've evolved over time. So this is a pretty complex scientific topic, very hard to illustrate through filmed content, but we're still able to find a way of weaving in these science concepts into the language lesson in a level appropriate, a cognitively appropriate, but also a language level appropriate way. So I'm going to exit out of the CPT now and hand back over to Dave.
Thanks, Anders. And I think it's fantastic. Everything that Anders described about what's important in a program like Impact in order to ensure that the language curricula is meaningful and, in this case, purposeful as well, is absolutely appropriate for elementary school learners as well. We want to be ensuring that early and often and as many times as possible, we are setting appropriate expectations for what language outcomes are going to be. Whether it is working through a unit of content specifically about a cross-curricular topic like history, we want to be very clear from the beginning that in this unit, students' expectations will be to talk about famous discoveries, talk about mysteries in the past, think and guess about the past, and use examples to support my writing. So those language outcomes are always first and foremost for us in all of the material that we develop. And at an elementary school level as well, we want to be also ensuring that, we are providing opportunities for students to show those outcomes in an age-appropriate way as well. For example, in projects, where students can use their hands and show that they have achieved these outcomes. Now they can talk about discoveries. They can talk about the past. They can think and guess about the past. And they can use examples to support their writing, but they're able to do so in a very, very concrete way that is appropriate to the age group.
Okay, so the second piece of criteria that we look at is the content meaningful to learners? Can learners understand the value of what they're learning? And can they understand where they are going to use this language when they leave their English class? And one type of meaningful language that we can cover in our materials is academically meaningful content. So throughout our materials, students are going to be presented with information and opportunities to practice language that's pertinent both to student studies in other classrooms, but also to their development as human beings and global citizens in the 21st century.
So an easy example of academically meaningful content within language learning presentation is something like cross-curricular subject areas. For example, this is an opportunity within this unit, within our World program, to not only present language that will need to be taught in any English language learning course, but present that language within a scientific context. In this situation, it's biologic. So looking at microorganisms. And you can see an example here of a very standard and very visually compelling vocabulary presentation, but take note at the context within the vocabulary is being presented. It is very clearly a scientific context. So this is very academically meaningful for students as well, because we're making clear connections between the specific English language learning content that they need to be learning, as well as connections with the other areas that they will need to be able to speak meaningful about in their lives, but also that they will need to be academically successful in within their school lives as well. We can also look at something like animals. This is also a cross-curricular area, but this also really, really hones in on something that many elementary school students are already interested in, which is the animal world and the natural world. Something like this gives us opportunities to not only academically challenge learners in a scientific context, but also you can see here examples of using different visuals and different diagrams to challenge learners from a visual literacy perspective as well, whether or not it's using Venn diagrams or using comparative visuals. In this case, looking at two different types of big birds in the world. Many students will be familiar with the ostrich, but are all of your elementary school students familiar with the cassowary? And can they tell you what the difference between those two big birds is, or are, I should say? This is academically meaningful content. It's interesting content for students because it touches on something that many elementary school students are already interested in. But ultimately, it is hitting all of those English language learning outcomes that we're looking for as well.
So this is an example from a brand new program that we have available at National Geographic Learning. This is from a series called Explorations, and this is a 5-course series that is really supplemental. So these are short courses. This is not a core curriculum. But what we've done is we've actually partnered with different National Geographic explorers, and these are people who might be photographers or scientists. In the case of Corey here, he is an engineer who has worked on making discoveries at the Titanic. So he has some really interesting personal life experience in a STEAM field, and we're able to actually partner with him to develop content that is totally original. So we've worked with him to script video content to introduce these topics to students at an appropriate language level, and use his experiences as an explorer as a springboard for some open-ended projects. So you've seen some examples of projects from other courses already in this presentation, but here's another example of ways that we can encourage this more open-ended production. And you'll note that a project like this, which is creating a poster, is really achievable. You don't need to have a lot of high-tech gear to have a meaningful lesson about a STEAM topic. We're able to make this really accessible for any classroom, or even as something that parents could do with their students at home in a situation like we're all in right now. In addition to academically meaningful content, we also want to make sure that the content we're addressing is personally meaningful. So our lessons also need to include, 21st century skills, global attitudes, values, and habits that will benefit learners throughout their lives. This is what we mean when we talk about content that is personally meaningful. And one example we can look at here is actually critical thinking. Critical thinking is a core component in all of the programs we publish here at National Geographic Learning. And oftentimes we talk about critical thinking as an academic skill, but actually it's a life skill. This is an example from a program for high school students called Perspectives. And we developed this program in partnership with TED. National Geographic Learning and TED have been partners in teaching English for many years now, and we have a whole suite of materials that feature content from TED Talks. This is a great example of how we can bring in authentic content, not just for supporting authentic listening skills, but we can also use this content to introduce things like critical thinking. In this particular lesson, Graham Hill, this gentleman here, is advocating for people to eat less meat as a way to lessen the environmental burden on the planet. It's a great TED Talk. I would encourage you to watch it. We don't have time to play any of it today, but it is a really great context for teaching this particular strand of critical thinking. In the Perspectives program, we call it helping students become critical consumers of information. So these are skills that students can use to identify when a speaker or the writer of a piece of text is trying to convince the reader or the viewer of something. In this case, what are the strategies that Graham's going to use to try to be persuasive? Not only is this a helpful skill for when learners encounter information, online or out in the world, but it's also a helpful skill for their own communication, because, these are the types of things that people do with language all the time, almost constantly.
Absolutely. And that idea of being a critical consumer of information is so incredibly important for us at National Geographic Learning. And while it's explicitly referred to as that in the program that Anders was referring to, we want to set the foundation for that in as many ways as we can in our elementary programs like Our World. And we can do that with as simply as having a whole unit around the topic of making smart choices. The language outcomes here are that a student will be able to talk about products and their safety and quality, recommend different products, report commands and questions, and write a product review. In order to do that, they need to be able to think critically about the types of products, that they're exposed to or that they use. We can help them consider that by considering the types of advertisements that they see and experience on a daily basis, whether print or online, which is more likely, right? On their devices, on their phones, on billboards, helping students be ad detectives, understanding not only how advertisers use advertisements to convey information, but also how advertisers use advertisements to manipulate us into consuming information as well. And ultimately, that leads to helping students think very critically about why they're making decisions at all. Are our students aware of why they make the decisions that they make? This is very age appropriate for elementary school learners. And we can take that even a step down. We want, in order to make critical consumers of information, we also need students that have basic values as well. And they need to be able to think critically about why they do or do not believe in those values and want to espouse them. It's difficult for someone to be a critical thinker and to think intelligently about the world around them if they don't have basic values and they're not able to do basic things like take care of others and understand that sometimes others need our help. Be caring. That is one local perspective, but then we can also help build that up for students to then take that idea of caring and bring that to a larger scale, like a mission of being able to help in a disaster and think and pair and share with others in the classroom as to what types of disasters might we experience and what can we actually do on an individual and in a group level in order to help in such a disaster and to help our community. All of this sets the foundation at an elementary age level for those critical consumers of information and critical thinkers at the high school level as well.
Now let's meet Patrick Meier, National Geographic Emerging Explorer and Crisis Mapper.
My name is Patrick Meier. I'm a crisis mapper. The field of crisis mapping that I'm in often involves hundreds of volunteers around the world who get online and basically support humanitarian operations. I call them digital humanitarians. One of the really key motivating factors behind what I do is to really try and help empower others to help themselves.
So the third area that we want to always be considering after whether or not the content that we're developing in our programs is purposeful, whether or not that language input is meaningful for our students is it relevant? Are our elementary school students, are our teenage students, our high school students going to be thinking about language and learning content in a way that is relevant to them in their daily lives, in their personal experiences, in their communal experiences, but also in whatever their current global experience is as well? That means that it's incredibly important for us at National Geographic Learning to always be considering the experiences of the students we know are going to be working with our programs and the types of students that are going to be in your classroom environments. All of our students bring with them unique personal experiences. Sometimes those experiences are very culturally linked. We have different students in our classrooms who bring with them different cultural backgrounds that are incredibly valuable, not only for making the content and the language they're learning meaningful, but helping other students in their classroom environment and with them understand how to use language to share their experiences as well. This provides a communal aspect. It makes the language they're learning more meaningful. It makes it relevant to them. And it also brings them more meaningfully into the learning experience. We can also utilize simple language topics in order to help identify and help draw attention to, in an appropriate and positive way, the differences in experiences and backgrounds of our students. Take, for example, the idea of home. For many of us, the idea of home means different things, but also similar things. Where our family is, where our positive memories are, what our positive experiences are in life, but also how our home actually manifests, the physical place. That can look very different across the United States, across different continents, and across the world. But ultimately, all are valid, and all are valid home experiences. Even a simple topic like looking at how different students, elementary school students all over the world, live and the types of homes that they live in, helps our elementary school learners on a meaningful and very personally relevant way start to accept the differences between them and their other classmates.
Hi, AJ.
Hello.
Where do you live?
I live in Wichita, Kansas. It's in the US.
Do you live in a house or an apartment?
I live in a house.
What's your house like?
My house is big. It has a living room, a kitchen, a dining room, and 4 bedrooms.
Do you have a yard?
Yes, I do.
Is it big?
Yes, it is. There are lots of trees. I even have a tree house with a little balcony.
Hi, Safia.
Hello.
Where does your family live?
My family live in Tanja, Morocco.
Do they live in a house or an apartment?
They live in a house.
What's their house like?
It's new and it's big. It's next to the ocean. You can see the water from the living room.
Do they have a yard?
No, they don't have a yard, but they have a big balcony. There's a table and some chairs on the balcony.
So you can see here that even the idea, even the language topic that's as simple as at home can be used in a really authentic global way to bring very personal relevance to students' language learning environment.
So here's one more example of a relevant language lesson. This is another example that comes from perspectives and is geared towards teenagers at a high school level. So the reading here on the right hand side of the page is all about what happened when people from different backgrounds were brought together to interact. But before students even complete the reading, they are being asked and being challenged to put themselves in those shoes. For many students, this is not all that difficult of an ask, right? Because many classrooms are an experiment in intercultural communication. So of course they're practicing some of these vocabulary terms, but the questions that they'll be asking and answering as they work in pairs are really rich and meaty. Examining things like cultural stereotypes at a pretty deep level. Here's another prompt. This is the My Perspectives prompt, and this occurs later in the lesson, where students are asked to explore some possible solutions to a really open-ended kind of challenge. Which of the communication styles from the article are most similar to your experience? What can we do to increase intercultural understanding between people from different countries? Ultimately, these questions are helping students reach their goal, giving students the knowledge and the skills, but also the opportunity to interact with one another, to discuss, and to be confident users of English, to the earlier point in the presentation. Now, in the interest of time, we have to wrap here, but we hope we were able to give you some examples of how we select real, authentic, global content in order to meet this criteria. Is the content purposeful? Is it connected to the types of things we want learners to be able to do when they leave the classroom? Is it connected to the speaking strategy, like being able to politely correct information? Is it meaningful to learners in the sense that they're able to practice the language that they're going to need in real life situations like other classrooms? And is it relevant to students and their the experiences that they're bringing into the classroom? Hopefully, you agree that some of the lessons that we were able to focus on today do achieve these three goals.
And so we at National Geographic Learning want to be able to support, and we do support, language learners at all age levels, and of course, teachers of language learners at all age levels as well. So all of the content areas and all of the criteria that we looked at today for English language learning material that is purposeful, that is meaningful, and that is relevant, those three criteria apply to everything that we've developed and we believe in across all of our materials for preschool learners, for elementary age learners, and for high school learners as well. So we do hope that after looking at some of the examples today, that you'll join us and take a look at some of the amazing materials that we have to offer for all three of those age groups.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks so much.